Hey, Jermaine Griggs here from hearandplay.com, and you are listening to the Musicality Podcast.
Ever wondered why some people seem to have a gift for music? Have you ever wished that you could play by ear, sing in tune, improvise and jam? You're in the right place. Time to turn those wishes into reality. Welcome to the Musicality Podcast with your host, Christopher Sutton.
Hi, this is Christopher, founder of Musical U, and welcome to the Musicality Podcast. Back in 2009, when I started my company, there really wasn't much information online about ear training and developing your musicality. But one site which stood out then, and which continues to be among the top sites online for playing by ear, was hearandplay.com. My guest today is Jermaine Griggs, who started Hear and Play back in the year 2000, and has had phenomenal success helping musicians around the world to learn to play music by ear. His success has led to him being a highly sought-after teacher and mentor in the entrepreneurial world, as well as a beloved teacher in the world of gospel music. And it's even led to him being invited to the White House to meet President Obama. Jermaine is a passionate educator with incredible insights on how learning to play by ear can be made simple and methodical for anyone. In this conversation, we talk about his own musical development and how he came to codify his method and launch hearandplay.com. Jermaine shares what makes gospel music unique, while also allowing it to be an amazing way to learn skills for all genres of music. And there's an inspiring example of one Hear and Play student who found great success despite a seemingly huge personal limitation. Jermaine also shares some nifty tips and tricks which you can apply right now to help you start playing by ear, as well as a bit of software that can make it dramatically easier. It's no exaggeration to say I've been waiting years to speak with Jermaine. He's really been a hero I've looked up to in the world of business and music education. Even with those high expectations, this conversation blew me away. I hope you'll love it as much as I did. My name's Christopher Sutton, and this is the Musicality Podcast from Musical U. Welcome to the show, Jermaine. Thank you for joining us today.
It is an honor to be here, Christopher. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So I'd love to start at the beginning, if that's all right, and hear a bit about how you got started making music.
Absolutely. My grandma had this piano, right? And my grandma would play it. She has this gospel meets Ray Charles kind of style. And being a little 6, 7-year-old, I got the pots and pans out because I thought I wanted to be a drummer, a little boy banging on stuff. So I would accompany her, and we had like a little 2-piece band. She on the upright piano, me on the pots and pans, until one day around the age of 8, I hopped on the piano and I noticed my knack for hearing music. You're an instructor, Chris. And, if you play every other white note with 3 fingers, you're going to come up with some kind of diatonic chord. Something's going to sound good. You're either going to be playing major. What do you have? You have probably like a 3 in 7 chance of playing a major chord. I've never thought of it like that way. But yeah, you could play a C major, you could play an F major or a G major as an 8-year-old if you just randomly played every other finger. And that's what I did. I could have hit a D minor, E minor, or A minor. I don't know what I hit, but it sounded good. And I started mixing chords up. And sooner than later, I was playing my first Disney song, or I think it was called Under the Sea. And my sister would sing. She's 3 years my junior. And we kind of started our own band. And that was like my introduction to the piano, literally teaching myself, because till this day, my grandma can't tell you the notes of the piano. She'll be like, this is F flat. I know she doesn't mean it, but it's just her talking. Till this day, she doesn't know the notes. I taught myself.
That's incredible. And was it literally just a matter of sitting down as an 8-year-old and hitting notes until you hit something that sounded good? Or did you have some kind of understanding of what you were aiming for? Or how did that work for you?
No, if I go back 30 years, without revealing my age, to that fateful day, I got the idea. My grandma was playing sort of every other finger, or she'd skip certain things. So visually, I could kind of tell that she was doing it. So I said, let me try it. And so that's kind of how I approached it. And that Disney song came on and I hit, the major chord. I said, wow, that sounds like that. So if anything, I probably had an acute ability to hear. I had a proclivity to that. But no traditional education. In fact, I would later join the school band and play clarinet, but during breaks, I would hop on the piano and everybody would be amazed that I could play what our band just played by listening.
Amazing. And how did things develop from there?
Right. So church for me was a really big catalyst. You put a 10-year-old in a charismatic church. My church was one that it didn't go by the program. It was like whatever ensued. So I got this ability to really, literally have to improvise. People go train for that and practice for that. That was every Sunday for me. And so I would learn the songs that the choir director wanted me to learn on tape, and I'd rewind the tape. I'd pick out the chords. But what I was able to do at an early age is understand the feeling that the chords gave me. So it didn't take a teacher for me to know that major was happy and airy and, kind of gumpy, like the ice cream truck. Boom, 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 boom. Like I heard that. And then, for me, minor was solemn and sad and serious and somber. And then later in church, you got to play dominant chords in a charismatic church. And this was even before I realized I was playing them. But I knew if I took that C major and I add a B flat to it, now we're talking, we're getting bluesy with it. And that's what gospel is. It's a lot of blues infused in there. And so I learned that. I knew that was the feeling. So if in church, Sister Murphy got up and she sang a really sort of traditional, what we call like a bluesy church, what do they call it? Shuffle. To me, those were the bluesy chords. Even before I knew what to call them, worship music, was the sadder, although it's not as sad, but it's more serious. And so those are the minor chords I was playing. So for me, it was just feeling and emotion. And I knew which chords to use, or at least try in my practice to deliver that.
That's fascinating. And I know a lot of our listeners, and certainly a lot of our members at Musical U, have felt very intimidated by that kind of situation, because they don't know how to improvise, or they think they don't know. And so that idea of standing up on a church stage, or even just getting together with friends and jamming, is super intimidating for them. For you, it sounds like that just all came smoothly. Did you ever have any kind of performance anxiety, or did you feel bad if you were playing the wrong notes, or was it all easy because you were young and your church was welcoming?
Right. So for me, looking back, it was backwards. A lot of people practice by themselves. And then there's this big reveal one day, this big, what do you call them in your world? Recitals, For me, it was like I knew enough. I knew a little bit. Hey, young man, come play for our youth choir. And so first I learned what I needed to learn. But then came the opportunity to play for the church service, which meant you could never really prepare. And because someone would stand up and sing Amazing Grace, and then the next person might stand up and sing Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. And I just had to follow. So for me at a young age, so in addition to feeling, to me, let's say that's the first layer, just certain things give you certain feelings and just learn to attach. I think people have a detachment to music when they practice and play it and learn it. Like there's this detachment that I can't fully describe, but it's like, sometimes I ask people, I say, just throw the book away right now. Just play this chord with me if I'm teaching my kid or my nephew. What does that make you feel like? Like, forget about the major, minor intervals right now, perfect fits. What does that make you feel like? Okay, now turn around. I'm going to play either that chord or something else. And I need you to tell me whether you hear that or something else. I get serious, but I really want people to unlock that ability, because at a very basic level, it's not that hard. We can get really super advanced, but hearing the difference between a major and a foreign chord and something that's not major to me, okay, we can do that. I can get an 8-year-old to eventually be able to tell me that. So I think it's like what my mentor, Tony Robbins, says, where focus goes, energy flows. So if I learn a piece and I never had that connection to feeling and what I really hear, then I think a part of me is going to be trapped. That music blows away, or, something happens and I don't know where I am. For me, it was opposite. I learned that certain melody notes, if I start on the third tone of the scale, that's typically going to be the major chord, the root of the key that I'm in. It's just going to be inverted. I learned those kinds of things without knowing the technical aspect. I just knew that if I played that C major chord with E on top, well, that would match the first melody note of "Pass Me Not, O Gentle Savior." So I learned these. So if somebody sung a song that I didn't know, but the melody was familiar to me, I could still follow, And it was these little tricks that made me perfect to be the guy online, one of the first guys to say, I can teach you how to listen to music, at the turn of the millennium. Because I had already sort of made all of my little tips and tricks and things as a kid to figure this out in live situations.
Absolutely. And one thing I really love about the hear and play approach, and that I've always admired in the way you teach, is there's quite a lot of people out there that can play by ear kind of naturally without having given it a lot of thought. But you, even though it did come naturally, or at least came smoothly to you, you've taken a very thoughtful approach to it, and you may not have studied the classical theory in order to understand it. You've understood it by ear. You've still ended up with the same kind of rules and very methodical understanding of what makes playing by ear possible. And that really comes to your teaching and the way you're able to explain it to other people.
Well, thank you. I did have to go backwards. Like I said, okay, well, if I'm going to do this for real, this is the year 2000. Okay, let me go backwards and figure out what I'm doing. And there was like this 1 or 2 year period where I said, wow, that was a dominant ninth chord? I've been doing that forever, I've been doing that for 12 years. So there was this 1 2 year period around the time when I was about 18, 19, creating my book, The Secrets to Playing Piano by Ear, where I really did go in there and it wasn't just play this chord, play that chord, which a lot of play by ear sites will do. And sometimes if I bring in a really advanced musician that's not classically trained, they will honestly be like, play this chord, play that. And I'm like, what kind of chord? It's got a major, a minor. It's got everything. It's so dissonant. And we can't even come up with the title of it. It's so advanced. So, we still succumb to that. But in this period, I really wanted to understand why I was doing what I was doing. Because with that understanding, I then could go beyond myself. I could have some crazy system in my head making it all work, but that's not going to be enough if now I got to teach this person over here, my daughter, my uncle. So now I need to systematize it for them. For example, like teaching somebody how to find the key of a song. Part of that is something you can't explain, like, humming the tonic, humming that root note. But what I found out is that people, if you're tone deaf, that's one thing. But if you're in a ballpark, like I say, most people will either be humming the root, the third of the root, because they'll hear that melody note, or the fifth of the root, because they'll also hear that melody note, all related to the same, let's say, C major chord on the root, but they're not able to hear what's the real root, but they're hearing the third, So then I came up with the minor chord trick, and I was like, okay, well, if you're humming the third, well, I said, just pick the chord that puts the third, that note on top. Pick the minor chord in root position that puts that note on top. So say you should be humming C, but instead you're thinking the key is E, right? And you're trying to listen to this. Well, what minor chord puts E on top? Well, A minor. And I just have this reference chart. And I said, basically, okay, test those other notes of the A minor chord. That's, so if you're humming E and you say, okay, the other two notes to test are A and C, because those are the other notes. Well, the minute you test C, wow, that sounds like the root, right? And then you test A and that wouldn't work, but C would work. So what it did was it gave them, if they were accidentally humming the third, it delivered the root to them. And think about if E was the fifth, or they were humming G accidentally, right? And they did the minor chord trick, that would deliver them to C as well, because C minor would be the root chord, to test again. So it sounds advanced, but when I put it in the reference and I explain it, people are like, whoa, I tried your minor chord trick and it helped to deliver the root on 3 of the 7 examples that you gave, so I just came up with unorthodox things like that, teaching people how to play the major scales. A teacher could say, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. I said, why won't he wear white when hot? My wife told me, it's hot outside. Why aren't you wearing white? And I said, why won't he wear white when hot? And I said, that's how you remember the whole step, half step. And people 20 years later are coming up to me, man, why won't he wear white when hot? That's how I learned my major scales, minor scales. I say, you don't need to learn your minor scales. If you know your major, you know your minor. So if you know your C major, just go to the sixth tone and play the same exact notes from the sixth to the sixth. So if you know C major's all white notes, go to the sixth. It's A, play A, play the C major scale from A to A, bam, you got an A minor scale. So it's things that the classical world would be like, sometimes they might cringe, and that's why I keep the world separate. But I acknowledge, and I really wish that I learned sheet music at an early age. I think it's too late for me now.
I think you found the perfect balance. I particularly wanted to ask you on this conversation how you had managed to take this skill that had come so smoothly to you and translate it into something that works so effectively for teaching other people. And what you just said, that you did methodically take the time to think through how you were doing it and think through how to explain it to others before you put your product out there, your book, and then the hearandplay.com site. It makes perfect sense. And I think it's such an elegant solution to still go ear first, but give people the actual intellectual understanding also, and the practical tips and tricks they need to actually improve quickly.
Absolutely. Yep.
So we raced through the story a little bit there, and I'd love to just circle back and explain a little bit how you managed to go from playing in church just yourself through to creating your first product to explain it to other people, and eventually starting, I say eventually, it was super early days in the internet, turn of the millennium to start a Learn by Ear site in 2000, 2002. There was very early days. Tell us what was it that made you go so big?
Right. Well, so let's go back to 1995. 1998. 95, I'm playing in the church. By 98, parents are asking me to teach their kids. So I'm developing sort of this local business. I'm 15 at the time. But my grandpa, I'm also a young minister in the church. I have a leadership role. You could tell I got the knack for talking. I could go all day with you, Chris. So parents are asking me to teach their kids. I'm this business guy. I don't know. That's a whole nother story from a whole nother world of mine. But I'm this young business guy selling Avon products at 12. So this is not related to music, but it's related to the entrepreneurial bug. So when you think about this young kid that's just got this nag, I grew up poor, and there was reasons for wanting economic success. And then I got this religious background and this music. I think it all comes to the head when I could take this knack for selling stuff like Avon, and I could match that with my knack for playing music. And so I started Hear and Play Music way before I discovered the internet. It was just called Hear and Play Music. And I'd show up to your house. I teach your 10-year-old son or daughter, 12-year-old. I had about 7 students at 15. And after school, my grandma would just drop me off at their house. And the launch of the tools I would eventually start selling started when I said, I'm teaching them all the same thing. I should come up with my own little workbooks. And for me, I turned playing by ear, I simplified it into notes create scales, scales create chords, chords create progressions or patterns, and patterns create songs. So I made this like 5-part sort of series, and each one of those things became a workbook, right? So let me teach you your notes and how they work. Let me teach you how to form them into scales. Why won't he wear white when hot? And then let me show you how to take those scales and pick out the chords you'll need. And then let me show you how to put those chords into patterns. And so that's what I began to teach kids. And then the songs that they would learn were obviously church hymns that I knew very well. And we'd all combine it like Amazing Grace. You could play that with 3 chords of the key. And so from there, someone said, Jermaine, you should put your stuff on the internet. And I said, the internet? I had AOL 2.0. I was just in chat rooms at that time. What did we do on AOL 2.0? Like message our buddies from class and chat rooms. And I never thought to start a website. So about 2 years later, the year was 2000, August 6th, I registered the domain name hearandplay.com. It was available. And the rest was history. I had to learn how to create a website. I had to learn how to market it. But I actually started selling those 5 books in the year 2000. I didn't have the 300-page course, The Secrets of Playing Piano by Ear. That's where you get the date 2002 from. This was just the same 5 books from 2 years back that I was teaching the kids with. And I probably sold some 300 copies of that, before probably 300 in that first year as a sort of 17-year-old, even before, I got serious with it.
I think it's incredible. And, as any of our listeners would know, websites come and go, and something that's hot for a few years tends to not be after that. And I remember back when I started my company in 2009, Hear and Play was, one of, if not the top site for playing by ear. And I think it's remarkable that that is still the case. If you go out there looking for info, and particularly in the world of gospel, your site is out there. It's helping people. It's helped millions of musicians now learn to play by ear. And I'd love to talk a little bit about what you're offering there and how you're helping people follow this kind of methodology that we've talked about.
Absolutely. So around 2003, I came up with my first DVD, and it was gospel. I don't know how I attracted gospel people, because the first book never said really gospel, although it did have hymns at the end, but I didn't market it as a gospel course at all. But I don't know, universe works in mysterious ways. So I had this gospel following somehow. And so my first video, the first time you could see me in video, was Gospel Keys 101. And I was teaching people how to play hymns. And it was a 3-step process: determine the melody. And I taught them about like neighboring tones, upper, lower, passing tones. Here's how you know if it's a chord tone or if it's just passing. And step 2 was harmonizing melodies. And then step 3 was adding the bass, like common bass and stuff like that. And that was the process. And that would send us along the lines of creating a Gospel Keys 200 and a Gospel Keys 300, until I said, why don't we make a gospel music training center, the gospel music training center? And we could release lessons every week. They wouldn't be on DVD. You could log in and you could learn. And we have a beginner version of the lesson, an advanced version, and we'd give them the MIDI file, and we'd even take the MIDI file, turn it into sheet music. But we put a disclaimer like, I don't know if this stuff is correct. It'd have all these accidentals in it and stuff because we weren't setting the key signature as I look back. But, that was it. And because it was a niche that's underserved, see, that's the thing. If anybody's looking for advice and they're a music teacher and things like that, and they want to fit into some mold. See, I never said I have to fit into a mold. I never said, well, I have to be classically trained or go to a conservatory or have a degree. I just said, who's out there that needs me like me, and who can I serve? And what came to mind is my gospel folks. Till this day, I don't know. I would have to Google it, but I don't know if you could go get a degree in like worship music or something, or could you make that your study, your field of focus, or even just church music in general? I don't know if that really exists, but in our world, you can come to the Gospel Music Training Center and we'll take you down a path of traditional hymns, worship, urban, neo-soul, even Latin. The thing about church music is that the gospel is it's a message, but the genre actually changes. It's like Martha Manuzzi will do Latin music, and then this singer will come in and do neo-soul, where if you just listen to the music, you'd be like, that sounds like secular music. So gospel actually lends itself to all the genres, depending on the artist and what they're inspired to make. So it's really not just a gospel platform. I think a music platform, but it certainly has, a gospel message.
That's so interesting. And that's something I really wanted to ask you about, because there are so many different listening skills a musician can develop, and it can be a bit overwhelming. And I think people who come to a course like yours that says we will teach you how to play gospel music by ear, that's very clear, and that they know that's what they want to do. And I really wanted to ask you, is it framed like that because musicians need to learn these general listening skills and they love gospel, therefore you'll teach them through gospel? Or is it that gospel music has particular listening skills that they need to develop and you need a particular course to explain that?
Right. I think gospel is unique. And then in another way, it's not unique when you compare it to other genres. Like I said, gospel borrows and influences everything. So I could put a blues song from the 50s against a gospel song from the 80s, and they would follow the same. Ray Charles sings Georgia, Georgia, Georgia on my mind. I'm not a singer. I hate when I sing and then I have to say I'm not a singer. But he does. Then there's a song in the gospel world by a group called Mary Mary. And their song, I think, is called Yesterday or something. And it's the same patterns, starts on the 1, then it goes to that bluesy 3, the dominant on the 3, and then the 6 to the 5 to the 4, the bluesy 4 to the flat 5, or whatever. And so we just make that comparison. So I think you can take blues. There's some jazzy songs in our gospel music training. There's Latin, but to survive as a church musician, there are some specific skills and you have to listen for it. So we just did a lesson. And if you're playing traditional praise gospel, it'd be dominant. You would never have a reason to ever play a major 7 chord in this subgenre. If I say traditional praise, it's a hand clapper. You're never going to hear a major ever. So I tell the listener, just eliminate that. Now, I'm not saying fully, but if you want to save your time in picking out chords, just eliminate the major 7 when you hear a hand clapping, foot stomping traditional praise song in the church. So, and I would slap them upside the head. I get really passionate. I say, so what are your pull of chords that we're pulling from here? And if they say major, I say, well, that's not the feeling. The feeling is bluesy, dominant. So you can definitely, there are certain subgenres in the church. Now, if I say worship wouldn't exclude dominant chords because, passing to the 4, a dominant chord will sound nice and even pretty, You could take a root and you could lower it to the major 7 and then you can lower it to the dominant 7 and that'll prepare you to move to the 4, to the 4th, up a 4th. And so I won't seclude it, but I'll say most worship, though, will just have nice major chords and triads, and you may add a 9 to it. See the difference with adding the 9, but sometimes you just want it natural and raw, and you'll not add the 9, and I just tried to get people to hear the differences between the emotions evoked, the subgenres that will lend themselves to certain chord classes, and then from there teach them the patterns at work, like praise music. I broke that into 5 parts. I said, here's part 1, here's part 2. Some songs have both parts. Some songs don't have both parts. And I showed them the differences. Another example would be in church, hymns. Hymns to me are melody driven. They were originally written, from my understanding, to just be sung, vocally like a choir. So they're going to be in basic 3-part harmony, So even if I knew the melody, but I couldn't hear the chords, or I've never heard the chords before, and I hear that the soprano is going from E, D, C, well, I could pretty much, without ever hearing that song or the whole choir, I could pretty much come up with what I think the alto and probably what the tenor is doing by 3-part harmony. So that's a whole nother sort of technique that I teach with hymns. So gospel, I think it answers your question both ways. I think because they like gospel and their identity is a gospel musician, it helps to just have a fully focused training center for gospel music. But I also think gospel can just be a tool to teach anybody music, because I think it lends itself to the same lessons, the same sorts of theory and techniques that any other genre would.
Fascinating. So would it be fair to say the majority of musicians who learn with Hear and Play are gospel musicians?
I'd say it's majority our share. I'd say we're probably, the last time I surveyed, I think we're 60% gospel. I think the name is a misnomer. It could be like Hear and Play gospel. But we've always had this desire to go outside of gospel.
You also have a pretty fully fledged jazz curriculum, right?
We do. And that'd be like another 20% of people. We'll get into our jazz with my good friend, James Rubel. And so we'll have 20% there. But like if someone said you could only pick one genre and you had to ditch everything else, well, it'd probably be gospel. But, just like in movies, certain people might start in one genre and then they want to cross over. Or music, you may start in R&B, but you get this feeling, is that R&B singer trying to cross over into pop, like mainstream? And that's the sense that I feel like we battle with. Do we want to be just learn music by ear, learn anything by ear. And some of our courses lend themselves to that, but it's definitely not the dominant. I think a lot of people see us as gospel, and rightfully so. Maybe that's why we've been here so long, because we stuck with what we've known and we have a core base. And when you have a core base of anything, I heard somebody say, if you have 1,000 people that love you for anything, you'll do okay. 10,000? Oh, you'll do really okay. 100,000? I mean, that's why a star like these celebrities from the 80s are still touring, because they have their base and they never need to go take another job or something like that, because, I mean, it may not be Beyonce kind of money, but if you got your base from the 80s, like I have a client in my other business from Chicago, they still tour. They tour several years later, decades later, because of that base. And I think similar with us, we have our base and we know who they are. And, pursuits of trying to go beyond that base have worked, but it still brings us back to that base.
That's interesting and fascinating how that gospel base, for the musicians who study it, it becomes a vehicle for almost any other genre, and the skills they've developed to hear and play can be taken in any direction they want to go after that.
Absolutely. Chris, have you seen a gospel player at NAMM or something, or seen a video on YouTube and just see how crazy they are? It's the same way with singers like Beyonce or just anybody, Aretha Franklin. They all have their base, a lot of them, more often than not, in church. It's something about church, and even on the musician side, because you have to develop so many things that then when you put us into the real world, we may have to unlearn some things, but you put us into the outside world, people tend to be amazed, more amazed than the other way around from what I've seen,
Yeah, there's a remarkable number of incredible musicians who have that church background. Mm-hmm. One of my favorites, Wyclef, grew up in church music, and all of his music is influenced by that gospel beginning. So over the years, you've certainly helped a lot more than 1,000 true fans. You've helped hundreds of thousands, millions of people over the, where are we now, nearly 2 decades Hear and Play has been running. Are there any that stand out to you as, a student you're particularly proud of, or a learning experience where you looked at it and you were like, yes, that is what we're trying to do with Hear and Play?
Right. I mean, there's been so many over the years, and one particular guy that I remember him coming to us in 2003 when I was picking up the phone myself, like, hearandplay.com, how can I help you? This is Jay. Oh, knock it off. This is Jermaine. Well, Jay is my nickname. I'm trying to avoid, my cover being blown, because I know they'll want to talk to me for a long time. So I used to say, this is Jay, which is my nickname. And Adrian called one day and he said, I'm legally blind. I'm blind, visually impaired. And so I can't really do your book. I mean, it's not in Braille or anything like that either. I said, well, I have a DVD coming out and this is going to be perfect for you. And I've always been one that did it slow. I even tell my advanced musicians that come in, I said, don't just point to the key. I need you to say the key 3 times, say what it is, say the interval, say any inharmonic equivalents. So I've always been that where if you turn off the DVD, you could still listen. And it served me well with this particular student, Adrian Stewart, who took a liking to my DVDs and over time bought everything that we had. I mean, rabid fan, customer, and friend. And years later, this guy, he sent a YouTube video to us. I mean, playing in rhythm, playing in time, soloing, and it just did my heart very well when I saw that, and he continues to update us over the years. Anything new, I even tell him, I call him, Adrian, you don't even need our stuff now. He says, but Hear and Play was my start, and anything you guys release, I buy it on principle. I give it to my nephews and my nieces. And so Adrian comes to mind. And if you think about it, I don't know who else could have served Adrian in that way. He had his gospel affinity. He didn't read sheet music or sight reading, and God knows I don't know how it works in that world. You can educate me on that. So I think Hear and Play came at a time that if I could epitomize the student, well, yeah, it's somebody who, he's an outlier, but I mean, he couldn't see it. He couldn't see and play it. It was no see and play. It had to be Hear and Play. And so, yeah, Hear and Play for Adrian worked out, and Hear and Play for, like you said, thousands of others worked out because either sheet music didn't work for them in the church, or they didn't go down that path. Or some people, they just wake up and they just want to play a couple chords, and you say, well, we got you there as well. So, it's this thing. And some people say, well, you should always be classically trained. And I said, if you have the opportunity, you're my kids, sure, take them down that path. You're 50 years old. I'm telling you, that's why they come to me. You're 50 years old. You just want to play. So yeah, that's probably who would come to mind.
That's such an inspiring example. I love that. So I'd like to be a little bit selfish for a moment and ask you, if I may, about your own children. I have an 18-month-old daughter, and I'm starting to think about how to raise her musically and how to make sure she grows up loving music and feeling natural with music. And I know you and your Sarah have 3 children, Jaden, Layla, and Brendan. I'd love to know, how have you approached their music education?
Absolutely. So my youngest, Brendan, I would say it now, he's got to be doing something in music. He's 6 now. When he's our age, I mean, he loves music. When he was 2 years old, he also has an affinity to write letters, like recognize letters and stuff. So I see a good memory, which helps for music. I see a good left brain. People think music is right brain, but it's left brain pattern recognition type of stuff. Chess players, musicians, I think there's some correlation, pattern recognition. And so he would type out names of songs in the iPad notes, and I'd see a note. I'm like, there's 200 songs here. And that's how he taught himself how to read. He taught himself how to read by writing out words from songs, album covers and stuff. So he absolutely loves music. And his favorite song right now on the piano is Lean on Me. And I took the same approach, with him as I did my older daughter, Jaden. I start off by teaching them the notes, and I say, hey, can you point to the 2 black keys? And they point to them. I say, can you point to the any other 2 black keys? And they point to them. I say, well, the white key to the left of the 2 black keys, right? Just right to the left is always going to be C. Can you point to another C? And I make it into a game. And when they do it, I do something. You did it. Point to another C. And I get them recognized. Okay, so if that's C, then I teach them F. And then I teach them how to do a C scale, and I teach them the proper fingering, and we stay there for a little bit. And then I teach them how to number the scale. And then what I'll do is I'll play games with them. Okay, point to the 4th tone of C, because I think people skip this part of it. And I think if you have an intimate knowledge of the number system, because when you're playing by ear, it's not just this airy fairy tale-y thing. We still have a roadmap too. And if you want to communicate with other ear players, you got to be like, go to the 4. And if that's not internalized, you're going to have a hard time. It can't be like, go to the bum bum chord, It's not the bum bum chord. It's the 4, So I wanted to teach them the numbers so now we can communicate, because we don't have sheet music. We don't have that realm, at least right now. I'm teaching them by ear. So they get the numbers in their system, and then I teach them how to do the chords. And once we do the every other finger of the scale thing, I think this unlocks it for them, because then I can put on a Disney song or a Nickelodeon song. And if the song happens to be in C, I'll find a song that happens to be in C, because even if it's in F or A flat, they're not going to make the relative connection to it. It has to be in C. If I find something that goes from C major to G major to A minor to F major, which is 70% of pop songs that they're listening to, then I hook them, because I don't hook them on something they can't relate to, which is a lot of kids, if we're honest, kids can oftentimes relate. So you do have to hook them with something that they really listen to, right? So whatever it is, I remember Justin Bieber had a song, Baby, Baby, Baby. And when I taught her that chord progression and she could play it and sing it, now we have her hooked. And I think that's how you hook a kid. And it goes back to what I learned 20 years ago. Notes create scales, scales create chords, chords create patterns, patterns create songs. And then if I find another song in C that has the same exact pattern, and then all we have to do is change the lyrics, now they're getting how Hear and Play really works. It's the patterns, baby. It's not the lyrics. They change the lyrics and the rhythms, but they use the same underlying chords. And when they get that, Now I have an ear player in the making.
Amazing. I think you've probably just described the Hear and Play philosophy for any age of student as much as your own children. And it's really enlightening to hear you talk that through. Thank you. So one thing I've always really admired about Hear and Play is that you are constantly innovating. And I think you and I could have a whole separate hour-long discussion about the business of running a music education company. But from a customer perspective or a musician's perspective, you guys are always coming out with exciting new courses or new products or new innovations about the way you serve musicians. And one thing that really stood out to me is your new Song Tutor software. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And I must say, I admire you too. I remember from our conversation, but you're a programmer, right?
Right. Yeah. Computer programmer by background.
Yeah, by background, which makes sense to me. I've always told people that musicians, particularly ear musicians, and programming, I think it goes hand. I have proclivities to programming too. Like I could follow a little PHP and Java because I work with programmers. But I'm like, you know what? If I wasn't a musician, I could do this. And you happen to have both of them, which makes sense to me. I've always said I wanted to be in software and I wanted to develop tools. So I said, what if we had like a calculator to help people take things to other keys? So you could punch in your chord, you could say up one, that's called instant transposer. So we created that like years ago. And then, but the latest invention that you're talking about is Song Tutor. And literally, it has a browser built in and the students can go search for any MIDI file. You could type like jazz solo MIDI and you'll come across thousands of pages of regular people that have put up their MIDI files. But you click it and then literally a world opens up for you to pretty much manipulate that MIDI file, slow it down to what I call turtle speed. You can highlight the notes. You can do split layers. You can loop certain parts of it. And then one thing that I noticed even other tools that existed didn't have was the walkthrough feature. Because I found if I wanted to really like learn a solo from somebody and I had a MIDI file, even if I looped it and slowed it down, it was still in motion. So the step feature just breaks up every little note. You can even arpeggiate it, and have every little note of the chord broken up, or you can group it by, timing. And to me, that was a great skill. And I use it myself. Sometimes, JP in my company, he's a way better musician than me. Like his musicality, like me, I'm a businessman split musician. So my time is split. But he's full on musician, like is on tour with people. So I'll sometimes ask JP, hey, can you throw in some of your sweet chords here? And all he has to do is make it a MIDI file. I open it in Song Tutor, and now I can have the mind of JP without having to bother him. Same thing. We'll have a musician from out of town, a famous musician come. Hey, just play us something. But we're recording MIDI. Disclaimer. We'll record 2 hours of MIDI. Because all of us want inside of their mind, but, sitting behind them and things like that is not the best use of time. We got it in MIDI. We can unlock that in Song Tutor, go through every little chord. And so Song Tutor is sort of like I think it's the perfect thing. A classical musician wouldn't get that excited about it because that's what sheet music is, You literally do have access to the mind of Beethoven, the mind of Bach. And your musician is only listening. So when you bring that to a program like Song Tutor, where it's the equivalent of sheet music, but it's lit up and it's just literal, and you can slow it down, it's those worlds sort of colliding in a very little way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love that because often what people struggle with playing by ear is they know in theory how to do it. And with very simple, slow examples, they do fine. But then they hear a song and it moves so quickly, they can't get a handle on it. And I love that Song Tutor lets you kind of get a hold on it and dig in and kind of explore the song in that way. And I also think it's really impressive that you've designed something that isn't just interactivity within, say, your gospel music training center or just on hearandplay.com. This is a tool where you can take any MIDI file, anything that inspires you, any genre, and you can do this same process to figure it out by ear.
Absolutely. And it probably came because we released MIDI files, and then we would say, go to Van Basco Karaoke, which is a very, it's been out for 20 years, but it's, it's very basic and the notes are really small. And I said, if I could do that on steroids with all my extra looping and step features, it'd be awesome. So then we just eliminated having to tell people to go over there. And we added 4 or 5 features to our idea, and we released Song Tutor. And then we said, well, why don't we just let the world in on this? Exactly like you said. And it actually, no, it was Hear and Play Song Learner in 2007. And then we redid it from scratch because it didn't work on Mac, only PC. We redid it as Song Tutor in the last 2-3 years. And that's what you're seeing.
Amazing. And that's definitely something I'd encourage listeners to go check out. If you've ever had that feeling that you could probably figure out a song by ear, if it just didn't move so quickly, definitely go check out Song Tutor and see if that can help you decipher it.
Yes, sir.
So you've been on an incredible journey developing one of the leading sites out there for playing by ear, and you continue to innovate. I have to ask, what's next for Hear and Play? Where do you take it from here?
Yeah, so Hear and Play, I mean, interesting you mentioned that because I just had a conversation with one of my marketing guys. He works for me virtually. He's in Silicon Valley. He's always telling me of some of his colleagues that, you know, so-and-so just got investment capital to take things to the next level or start a business. And I've always, since I've been grassroots, I've been, bootstrapped. You know, I started with $70 as a 17-year-old. I never wanted to share the company or this idea of an outsider or to have to answer to an investor. But lately, and I'm just talking out loud, I've been open to this idea of what if we really did bring that world to Hear and Play, and we didn't just operate on, you know, our cash flow basis like we did, but we actually had this investment pool to really make this thing. Maybe it meant Song Tutor for every instrument. You know, it gave us the funding to do something like that. Maybe it meant Hear and Play TV, 24/7 programming. You could go to this online channel and there'd be a saxophone teacher on at 1 a.m., you know, there'd be a oboe teacher on or something like, you know, and I've really been considering that because, you know, when you get to 17 years, you're like, well, what else? You know, you don't want to be like the child actor who like, you know, did it so early that now they're a little tired of it. So we have been looking at things like that. And even if we didn't take, you know, investment money like that, still approaching things with that startup mentality. You know, there's still pages that I haven't updated from 2003. There's, you know, there's a lot of complications from being the first at something as well, because new players can come in and innovate and have a fresh look at what, you know, you haven't been able to keep up with. So there's that aspect of it, but I see us having something like 24/7 programming. I see us catering to different instruments. I see us having software capability for guitar, you know, although it's hard to figure out MIDI and guitar. There's so many places to play the same darn chord. The piano is just 1 C3 or 1 C7, you know. But I see us getting into that. I see us one day, I used to say, having physical Hear and Play centers, and it be in communities where I think that it would be apt to this style of learning and genre. So what about a Hear and Play center like the Yamaha? I think they have their own Suzuki centers or something like that, you know, but it'd be all non-traditional, you know? So it'd be like, you could learn how to be a choir director here, you know, or you could learn, it'd be like that. So the sky's the limit. And obviously we've done nothing with apps like you have. We've done nothing with iPad. So bringing Song Tutor over there. And there's so much more that we can do. So while, you know, I'm so grateful that people applaud me for, you know, being out 17 years, you know, I still got some reinvention as well that is, you know, necessary.
I think it's incredibly inspiring. You know, there aren't that many people who would play by ear and then take the next step and want to help other people play by ear. And there aren't that many people who are helping other people play by ear and want to take the next step and turn it into a product and reach thousands or hundreds of thousands of people online. There certainly aren't many people who do that and manage to sustain it online for 17 years and be leading the market for that long. And I think it's awesome that after this time and having had so much success, you are clearly still thinking 10 times the size, and how can you be even better for the next 17 or 30 years? It's incredibly inspiring. Thank you so much, Jermaine, for joining us today.
Hey, the pleasure has been mine.
Unlock your full musicality with Musical You membership. Find out more at musicalitypodcast.com/join.
Wow, this conversation was such a treat for me. Let's recap the many big takeaways there. Jermaine first learned to play by ear by experimenting and simply matching notes he played to what he heard. He started with just the white notes of the piano keyboard and learned to create chords by skipping every other note. And then he found he could match up notes with the Disney song Under the Sea. Although Jermaine didn't start by studying music theory or sheet music, he also didn't just treat playing by ear as a mysterious talent or a gift. Instead, after some experience teaching people in person, he took the time to analyze his own approach and identify the rules and little tricks that let him quickly figure things out by ear. This led to a beautiful combination of an ear-first approach with actually understanding how you're doing it too. This enabled him to create his first book and then start hearandplay.com, perhaps the first and still one of the leading play-by-ear websites online. At Hear and Play, they primarily serve gospel musicians, but as Jermaine explained, gospel music can actually be a vehicle for developing listening skills that work across a wide variety of genres. There are some specific skills a gospel player needs to pick up, but having trained with the Hear and Play method, they're actually ready to go out into almost any musical direction and confidently play what they hear. Jermaine shared several great tips and tricks. The sentence, "Why won't he wear white when hot?" as an easy way to remember the whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half pattern of whole and half steps that create a major scale, and how you can easily go from there to a minor scale too. He said that often we find playing by ear difficult because we've let ourselves become divorced from the actual sound of the music we're making. Taking the time to simply play a chord and really listen to its mood, and then compare that to a different type of chord, can be a great way to start making that ear connection. He shared the minor chord trick to help you work out the key of a song. He said if you're not guessing the tonic note correctly on instinct, then you're probably accidentally singing the third or the fifth of the root chord. So try creating a minor chord with your guessed note at the top, and then try singing the other two notes. If you were mistakenly picking the third or the fifth, then this trick will help you go straight to the true tonic. Jermaine also said that depending on the genre, there are going to be certain types of chord that are highly likely and highly unlikely, and that can really simplify your options when trying to play a chord by ear. Jermaine shared one moving example of a man who was legally blind and wanted to learn to play piano. The traditional sheet music method would have been extremely challenging for him to learn with. Instead, he followed the Hear and Play method and was able to reach an incredible level of performance ability in gospel piano. At Hear and Play, Jermaine is continually innovating to serve musicians in more and better ways. One of their latest creations is the Song Tutor software, which can take any MIDI file you find online and let you slow it down, even play it back note by note, giving you a perfect way to gradually figure it out by ear. We'll have a link to the Song Tutor software as well as everything else mentioned in this episode in the show notes. There are two things that blow me away about Jermaine. The first is that he took such a natural ability to play by ear and then really methodically turned it into something that can enable other people to find that same freedom. And the second is his unstoppable ambition and vision. From the outset, Jermaine wanted to serve a huge number of people with Hear and Play, and even after incredible success, he's still dreaming of even bigger and better things to come. I came away from this conversation hugely inspired and excited, and I hope you're feeling the same way. Jermaine has proven that learning to hear and play is possible for anyone, and there's no limit to what we can accomplish in our musical lives if we continue to dream big. If you're feeling inspired by today's episode, if you're a gospel musician or you want to be, or if you can see the benefits that Hear and Play's gospel or jazz music training center or their Song Tutor software could bring to your musical life, regardless of your favorite genre, I highly recommend heading over to hearandplay.com and dive deep into Jermaine's incredible teaching there. Thanks for listening to this episode. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll be thinking about wearing white when hot and talking about the power of whole steps and half steps.
Thank you for listening to the Musicality Podcast. This episode has ended, but your musical journey continues. Head over to musicalitypodcast.com, where you will find the links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as bonus content exclusive for podcast listeners. That's musicalitypodcast.com.
Hey there, Christopher again. Just a quick word before you take off. This podcast is brand new, and I have two things to ask you. Number 1, if you're enjoying the show, please go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe to the show, and then rate and review it. This would mean a huge amount to me, and it really helps us get the show out there in front of more people, and that means helping more musicians just like you. The second thing is, I want your feedback. What do you think of the show? If there are things you love, hate, or would like to see us add, if there are guests you think we should interview, or if you have a burning question about musicality that you'd like us to answer on the show, please shoot me an email. It's hello@musicalitypodcast.com. Thanks so